Very with us in this. As you can see, it's a very warm evening, and we are happy to have a very warm and open discussion. So, our two speakers today, of course, Aparna is the curator for this, I think, wonderful exhibition. Aparna Baliga is an art historian, translator, and curator who is interested in areas of gender and sexuality, Indian aesthetics, contemporary art practices, and design history. She presently teaches in the Department of Art History and Aesthetics, Faculty of Fine Arts, the Maharaja Sayajji Rao University of Baroda. Aparna also teaches in design institutes, writes on contemporary Indian art. She had graduated in History of Art from Kala Bharati, Shantiniketan, and did her post-graduation and doctoral studies in art history and aesthetics from the Maharaja Sayajji Rao University of Baroda. She's, of course, the curator of this exhibition along with Leela Gupta. Devyani couldn't be here as he's a little but the texts were all done by Aparna. And we are obliged to her that she could stay back for this little conversation with Parul. And when I reached out to Parul, and she was like, yeah, of course, I will be there, this is exciting. And Parul told me she doesn't need an introduction.
I didn't say that.
She said, no, you can just say I'm a professor at JMU, that's good enough. I think you all know her. So over to the view. Parul, would you like to start and then hand over? Yeah, please go ahead.
Thank you, Leela. I want to start by really congratulating our gallery, especially, Leela, for making this exhibition possible and also for involving a young researcher like Aparna, and who has spent so many years working on a PhD thesis on a very neglected area, women artists in India, Indian art history. And when a gallery of this kind reaches out to a professional PhD researcher on an area which is so underworked, it creates a synergy which reflects on the very quality of the exhibition that you see all around. And even the title, which is about spaces of their own, it is again resonating very closely with her research interest. And, so it's a bit uncomfortable for me to be sitting, but so many of us standing. So when I first saw this exhibition a couple of days ago at the opening, my initial reaction was, where were these great women artists? Which sounds very much like that famous question raised by Linda Laughlin, why have there been no great women artists? And that was more in the context of Euro-American art world, whereas this really speaks about various kinds of provisions in Indian art historiography. And I was also thinking about the title that you've given, of Spaces of Their Own, which seems to draw from the title of an essay by Virginia Woolf, The Room of One's Own, which sounds almost like a kind of feminist manifesto. And so it's very important for women at a certain point in history to assert their own space, because own space also means own time, especially those women artists who were married, who were part of domesticity, and for them to be able to find their own time and space, without which creativity is not possible. And of course, as you can see, it's a mix of artists. In fact, I think out of 14 artists,
Yes.
3 are pretty well known, and out of 3, Amrita, as you can see, is a real star. She was one of the first women artists to present herself as a professional artist. And so much so, she's really carved a place of her own in the canon of Indian art history. So much so that even somebody like Hussain would not hesitate to regard her as almost you would call her mother of Indian modernism and so on. But apart from her, there are many artists who were married to a very well-known male artist. And I was very surprised when I walked into that honor and I saw Reba Bourne's work. And I was telling myself, gosh, I was in Shantiniketan for so many years, 5 years. I knew so much about Somnath Bohr and so many of these male artists. I knew that he was married to an artist, Reba Hore. But never did I get any opportunity to even look at her work. So there are serious omissions in the writing of history. And as I'm saying it, I think everybody's implicated. It's not that, I'm trying to say it from some distance. And so if we reflect on this question as to why it took so long for, say, such an exhibition to happen. I was reminded of Geeta Kapoor's early writing, I think before she wrote Modernism. And there was actually a very interesting disjunction between art practice and art discourse. And art practice much preceded art discourse. And one of the reasons for this kind of a mismatch was, I think, there was this low ideological baggage of cultural nationalism because of a colonial past. So even somebody like Geeta Kapoor in her early writings would say that if we really take into consideration the historical context of production of art, then gender would automatically be addressed in that critical frame. And I've got one quotation from her early writing to exactly tell you what she had written. She wrote, this is 1996, feminist politics in women's art is at times over and above the intention of the work. It is inherent in the historical context of its production. So it was perhaps this which was responsible for the oversight. It was a systemic oversight. And this was usually the problem with most of the Marxist cultural art historians who were operating within the domain of class. And in fact, it reminds me of this famous quarrel which happened between seminal feminist art historian Griselda Pollock and another very well-known British Marxist art historian, T.J. Clarke. And they were both teaching. In fact, I discussed it in one of my classes. And they were constantly quarreling at the University of Leeds because they were teaching the same department. And T.J. Clarke actually felt that if you are a good cultural historian, if you really critically look at class, then other inequalities can also be addressed, which is really not the case, as pointed out by Griselda Pollock. So there was this kind of a problem with the critical frame which was used at that time. And the other question which I wanted to raise, and here I would like to go to the next slide, and point out this very important pioneering show which happened in 1989. It was called Through the Looking Glass. And this was the first time when four women artists, they decided to collectivize and be part of an exhibition. And it was a traveling exhibition. They also decided on the medium, scale of the works. They insisted on painting watercolors and small scale so that it could travel, even to places which are away from the metropolitan centers of art. And so this was a very important feminist exhibition. In fact, call it following the chart, that this is the first time when there was a feminist intent which could be ascribed to an exhibition. there was a conscious collectivization of these women artists, right? But what the problem was with the discourse, because the two main curators who wrote about it, Ashish Adhyaksha and Ajay Sinha, they were very hesitant to give it any feminist intent because they were very cautious. They thought that if they really underline its feminist aspect, then it's going to lead to the heroization of these women artists. And that will do them disservice. As a result, they kept saying that no, we do not want to read too much into even the term lyrical, in terms of defining the style, even the scale of the watercolors and so on. So they actually shied away from ascribing this feminist intent, which of course gets called out by somebody like Itachar. And of course, this earlier misrepresentation or omission was, because these are the four women artists who were part of the Looking Glass exhibition in 1989, and as you can recognize, Madhu Parekh, Nalini Balani, Ambika Singh, and Leela Sheikh. So they were part of this collective. And the reason why it happened during that time was also because these artists were very responsive to what was happening at the ground reality. There were women's movements which were happening. There was, I think the decade 75 to 85 was declared as the International Women's Decade by UN, and there was a lot of pressure on the Indian state about doing something about women's inequality because of the result of activism, and therefore the government had to spend a lot of money setting up institutes learning, research in women, WSRC, Women's Research Study, Women's research groups had come up in different universities. And so one has to look at exhibition of this kind within its very broader social context. So that is perhaps what gives us a handle to look at it and appreciate why this was a pioneering moment. And I would also want to conclude by referring to Geeta's another take on gender issues when she published this work, It Was Modernism, which is now, of course, recognized as a very authoritative book. This is an anthology of essays which were written by her earlier. But what is very striking is the very first chapter deals with poor women artists. So it was almost an attempt to redress the past, overlooking that she was responsible for. So, of course, now a lot of things have changed. Gender and class, these are not the two important issues. In a country like ours, the question of caste also becomes very important. So, which have been really looked at particularly these days. And now we've reached a stage where feminism is actually, raising critical questions about art history as a discipline, so much so that one is left wondering that what will be left of art history after the feminist critique? Will it remain as it is, or will it completely go through overhauling? So with that, I would like to invite Aparna, who has done stellar work putting together this exhibition, and over to Aparna.
First of all, I would like to thank Reba, and it was really nice. I don't know whether because she's a woman curator, and I keep on emphasizing on qualifying the term woman curator, woman artist, and because I think it's again quote unquote strategic essentialism, which is very, very important till date, and I really felt the difference while working with her every moment, because people looking at my CV, they just say, I need to go feminist CV here, So I'm excluded from many art fair talks and everywhere, feminism will change. So all thanks to her for including me or thinking about me for this show. And definitely, now she will be angry with me, Parul ma'am, because see, I was a student of Shantini Ketan
long back, from 2000 to 2005. 2005 I joined Baroda, and we didn't have a single woman faculty. And I had a lot of questions because I was already in my school, Fatkavan, Calcutta, introduced to some of the texts on which I later worked on for my research project. Now, and we didn't have any kind of feminist discourse or any plain, simple discussion on women artists except for Amrita Sher-Gil. And that, worried me. I had a lot of anxiety. And when I joined Baroda as a student of art history in 2005, I saw these amazing teachers like Parul ma'am and Reba ma'am and many others like Bhanja Shetty. So it was not only about women teachers, but teachers with immense intelligence and agency, who prodded you, the students, to look at the gendered realities through the classes. It's not that feminism alag se. Yeah, of course, it was part of our methodology which she taught. Like we were introduced to Priscilla and all. But also, when she was teaching, because see, I am also primarily a teacher and I go back to my classroom often when talking about this project because they are all interrelated. So when she was teaching Impressionism, she included women artists. So not separately, but you have to see or look at these artists through the gendered lenses also. So that is what was very important for me institutionally when I joined Baroda as a student. And then I began with Sunayani Devi. In Chandigarh, I wrote a small piece for our students' channel. And then when I joined Baroda as a student, we have this dissertation paper for which I began looking at, these women artists. And I had a lot of questions because, the first thing is, are they different than their male counterparts or colleagues? Then I found many sentences were there, and mostly, I was being discouraged and told by many of the scholars in Chandigarh that, they were like craftsmen, who used to work like her father or brother, and what is so special about them? And then I began looking at the wider contours of the idea of modernism itself, which is very, very gendered. Okay? And coming again from the Greenbergian discourse of demeaning the idea of crafts and the woman's practice as something which is very much connected to craft and can't be part of the modernist idea of fine arts. Now, in the context of the Swadeshi period, with which we also started or began this exhibition with Sunayani Devi's works, so the spaces of interiority or domestic becomes highly political. Because Ghar or Griho, they become very political. Okay? Family is the embryo of the nation state. Okay? And within these domestic folds, we will see these artists. So I'll just begin with my presentation so that it contours me and I don't move here and there. So again, beginning with that question why there were no great women artists, and again looking through the discourses of early modernism in India. So there existed, the woman existed, but they existed as an image, So they existed, as an image. But before that, as I mentioned, that God and Griho, okay, they became very important. That is Bahi, the representation of Bahi, the external world, where the Babus were like being dominated by the Britishers actually. But when they entered their home, they were very happy that their wife, they were painting the alponas and all. And so they, preserve that unspoiled domain. I'm actually using Patuvita's framework here a little bit. So, Partha Chatterjee, no, yes, not Partha Chatterjee. So, Art was, written about the idea of God, Griha Lakshmi, one who protects the peace and happiness, undisturbed by the British influences and all. And so, you have Bahi. So I have used this screenshots, one poster and the screenshot, film still from the film Hore, a novel by Dhurandhar. So you can see the woman coming out of their zanana, the private space, and the men going inside the private space. Okay? Now the men, apart from the family members, can go in. Okay? And there is the entire redesigning of everything. Not only, the language, the arts, there are these stages, but the costume. So here you see Gyananandini Tagore, who designed the saris which are all wearing now, and with the blouses, because you wrapped just a sari and you can't go like that to the public sphere. Okay, so there is this reimagining of everything: food, literature, clothes, everything, according to the changes of the Hore and Bahi. And I said that, someone told me, why, this is a very negative question of why there were no women artists. But these are the reasons, they were there as images, like this ridicule that, a progressive woman is, working, going for a class or a job, taking her umbrella, or she is like, asking a man to pose like a female and she's working, So,
where was this published?
This was published in
News magazine.
Yeah, these were published in magazines. Yes. And you can see again a woman boss. So these are the threats. If a woman come to the public sphere, what will happen? She will boss the man, and he will be serving the woman. And again, if she's educated, then the husband is going to serve her tea, and she's not going to serve tea anymore, and be a very helpful person in the domestic sphere. And these are again model looking at Pashkara. So, a woman who is continuously reading novel and she has become mad and she has lost all her morals. Okay? Yeah, she has lost all her character. So these are the reasons actually, you can say. And women who dominated or made the men, like transformed them into, goats and all. Okay? Yeah, witchcraft, witches. Okay? And there were these Golab Shundaris, so coming from influence by also the Pada tradition. This is an oil painting. So highly sexualized images, okay? Women without any agencies. Now, as I mentioned that from the Hore, Griho, and the idea of Swadeshi, okay? So there, you see the women are, working on the Alpuna. Alpuna is something, in Bengal, the floor painting, so which had been appropriated actually by the Shantiniketan artists, okay, to talk about the discourse of the indigenous model or contextual model, okay? Because, the Shantiniketan modernism, or even which began in Calcutta, you can say, that it was looking at larger Asia, okay? And it was also looking at the interiority of itself, Bengal, Alpuna. And they also appropriated the idea of something which is very domestic, the Tatha, which was made with love by the woman for the men or other women of their of the family, okay? And later it got commercialized, of course. So see, they're appropriating, they have no problem in appropriating these two forms and telling later that, they were just craft practitioners and how can we look at them as fine arts, artists who are practicing art. And I've also taken that still from Debdutta, where she is working on this German, these were called patterns, okay, which were available and you just stitch it, okay, so which was imported from Germany. And Debdutta was herself, writing, if you know the story, and talking about many things, and her brother-in-law says that please write about your own life, your own reality, okay, that is the truth. And she goes on. But that interiority of home, there is a very interesting framework which Griselda Pollock, talks about when she discusses women artists. But in the context of Indian, this early Indian painters, homes, home is not exactly only the place which belongs to the woman anymore. It's appropriated, So the question of femininity gets appropriated by the idea of masculinity, to define masculinity. Okay? What is the idea of the essential maleness? If you go back to that discussion initiated by Ashish in Intimate Enigma. Okay? So this is Vichitra, and this is a drawing by Nodala Goshu, where you can see that all these artists are there, Nodala Goshu, then theorists, our art historians like A.K. Kumaraswamy and all are there. And it is here where Sunayani began also her art journey. She was trained as an artist, mentored as an artist in this art space within the domestic space of Jorashaku. Now, there is a very interesting still life which is part of this exhibition, and which actually shows fruits, a basket of fruits, and also vegetables, like potatoes, which are very famous in Bengal, and the flowers are also there. And she would work, she didn't have a space of her own, like Virginia mentions. Okay? She didn't have a studio space. She worked in the kitchen, she used the water which was used to wash the vegetables. She would dip her brush and she would paint, And that reality you can see in that still life there, okay? Which is there. So, some more works, Baby. And she was very fond of decking her daughter-in-law and all, and her aunt. So these were all inspired by her aunt, who had also pets. And Lakshmi, another very important image, the domestic goddess. This was very, very much appreciated, that women can learn, they can teach, they can do whatever, that they cannot transgress the domestic sphere or the domestic well-being. Now look at this very carefully. This is by Yokoma Taikan, who was also part of this domestic art space in Jorashaku, a Japanese painter. And if you look at the works there, you will see a deep connection between Sunayani's works and Taikan's. Okay. So these spaces, private spaces, the terrace in Jorashaku was also very educative, where people came, mingled, sang, wrote songs, So these were all part of our educational background, you can say. And the terrace had been constantly being talked about, where the women would go if they were sad and express themselves. So this is one of those. So I've just quoted Stella Cambridge, who was one of the earliest art historians to write on Sunayani Devi. The timelessness of the folk practices, the flowing curves of the Alpana reveals the lively lines of the transcendental Indian art. Again, when I was constantly mentioning in my walkthroughs the importance of line, because line and its extended idea, being part of the idea of the decorative, was always used against Indian art by the British writers. And when the anti-colonial discourse was being framed, the Swadeshi aesthetics was being framed, they highlighted this idea of line. So if you read Bakeshwari Prabandhamali by Abanindranath Tagore, you'll see he's constantly trying to theorize the idea of line and associate that with the idea of femininity. So whichever idols we'll see, she will see. And it's not that she will only, look at Hindu gods and goddesses. She also painted this portrait of, image of painting of Christ. And if you look at this is again very different from those, those elements of, it doesn't have the elements of Swadeshi aesthetics as such. And it reminds you maybe of Giotto, that Renaissance influence you can see. And this is again a self-portrait, which is also part of this exhibition of Sunayani Devi. So she keeps in her mind the tradition of profile portrait, okay, in her family. And so this is a profile portrait of an aging woman artist represented by herself. Okay. So this is the still life which I was talking about. So her niece was also an acclaimed artist, Protima Devi, who wrote this notations of dance actually. And she was also costume designer. So you can see that she is the one who introduced batik in Shantiniketan. And she also, designed choreographies. And you can see the Baliga's influence in the posture and also in the costume. So I just got this image as a reference. Now, Gouri Bhanja, whose works we have here, was a very important pedagogue who taught crafts. And in Shantiniketan, again, as I mentioned that the Greenbergian idea of modernism excluded crafts. So actually when I also began my research, people said, these people did crafts. But crafts was also very inclusive in the understanding or framing of the indigenous modern in Shantiniketan. So you see the batik works. And you see the Alpana patterns also, which are very much there, strongly in the batik works. So you see them in the batik, you see them in the painting. Then some questions. Now this is a very interesting thing, which, now I had to look at the memoirs to reconstruct this artist. Because there were hardly any written material. Again, that anxiety where there, why there were no great women artists, The people were telling, people say that, oh, they were there, why are you derogating them? No, they were there, but how were they written in history? As partners, as sisters, maybe her father has done the work, oh, her brother has. That was the kind of writing on them mostly. Hardly any good reviews or any good biographies on them. And very little, of their work, less of their works was seen in, public spaces, exhibition spaces, mostly magazines. So I had to reconstruct them through their memoirs. So Rani Chakura's memoirs were one such, she wrote many memoirs actually. So where she brings in this discussion, where she asks Abanindranath, then why can't the woman paint landscapes? And Abanindranath says, because women can't lift easels. then he must have seen, he should have seen Dhurandhar's, Ambika Dhurandhar's works anyways. Now let's see whether the women in Shantiniketan did landscapes. So they did indeed. So this is Jamuna Devi and her landscapes, who was also an art teacher in Shantiniketan. And you can see a brilliant, conversations he had with South Asian art. So you can see the hell scroll from Japan, and you can see the fire, and you can see a kind of semblance in her batik work also. Katha and a design for a sari. There was also this very interesting discussion mentioned by Ranchando in one of our memoirs, that where she's just drawing the portrait of Andrews, and he said, "Oh, you cannot paint me like that. You cannot draw my nose like that, because that's very, very not. It lacks that Aryan aura." Now there were collaborations actually. That is a portrait done by Rani Chandra, and that is a collaborative work between
Which one?
That Abanindranath's portrait, between Abanindranath and Rani Chandra. Okay? Abanindranath Tagore and Rani Chandra, they're both of them signed. Okay? Yeah. And this is Hashmi Devi, a very well-known writer whose work we don't see much, but she was very famous, mostly for children's poem and short stories. And so the collector who had this work told me that he collected it from a Kavadiwala, the scrap collector, when she was thrown out of her marital home. So this is just a brief introduction, kind of, because I really wanted some contours to my critical framework a little bit. I won't go into the detail, but formalism is a very interesting thing. Okay, because I think formalism speaks a lot. Okay, the linearity, the idea of the lyrical, again became very like, how do I look at these women artists? Through which lenses? Because lyricalism, line, linearity, all these were appropriated already. Okay, and traditionally also in Indian miniature painting, line is something which is not feminine exactly. Okay. Again, I'll just briefly connect this discussion as an introduction to the conceptualizing of the exhibition. Is that now initially it kind of began with Sunayani Devi, then Gouri, and then we thought that why not keeping the ceramics of Kiran Barua? Why not keep the prints? Why not keep the utilitarian pottery? I mentioned it because Ira Chaudhuri stresses that these are utilitarian pottery. This is part of the everyday life. Because also that there are exhibitions only on Reba's works or only on Ira Chaudhuri's works. But when we look at Reba's works with Kamala Gupta's works there, with Devyani Krishna's works and Ira Chaudhuri's, it creates a context. I have mentioned in the curatorial note that the list is not complete. It's quite open, okay? And it's a process, okay? It has ruptures. And we want the earlier artists to converse with their sisters in the future. So you have someone like Sunayani Devi from early 20th century, then you have Gouri, Bhanja, and then you have Kamala Gupta, and then you have Kiran, Barua, Leela, Mukherjee, and Ira Chaudhuri, who are all together in Shantiniketan. Okay? And then you have someone like Devyani Krishna, who was part of the Delhi Shilpi Chakra. And you have someone like Reba, like Parul ma'am has already talked about how surprised she was, and she knew. So I was thinking, we should put also Reba Hore, in the context of this exhibition. Okay, so we have Reba Hore, and there'll be Prabha. Again, very less of documentation have been done on B. Prabha's works, and early women sculptors were also seen very less. And there was always, when I was documenting, my book doesn't have any actually. So I was thinking, maybe conceiving this exhibition as a sequel to my book, that now I have to include ceramics, I have to include sculpture, because that's very important. Once Ramkeeper page also, but this is oral history, and mind you, I really believe in oral histories because they are very important to construct the woman's art history or woman's history. So she was told, sculpture is not a woman's domain, borrow their cards. She was told this by Ramkeeper page. And you have a very, she mentions that an artist cannot be a craftsman. A craftsman can be an artist. Discourses, of modernism, non-inclusive discourses of modernism, I wanted to question through the designing of this exhibition. So I think now I will stop because I can just open it up.
I'm not going to ask you so many questions. I also want there to be discussion between Aparna and the audience. But one thing which what you said just now set me thinking is, really, you make open possibility of rewriting the history of early modernism, where you don't look at artists through the same lens in terms of them being unique individuals, but rather possibility of shared creativity, possibility of shared signature, for example. So that's going to completely, shake the very ground on which a lot of these canonized artists are standing. So I can see a lot of disruptive possibilities in the way in which you can actually proceed in terms of critical historiography and all that. And I want to just ask you, I know that Amrita, for example, has written on Sunayani Devi earlier, and I just want you, I'm sure you're familiar with what he has written. How would his take be different from yours, for example? You can, I'm sure you can.
Well, of course. But see what I saw missing in all those writings about Sunayani is that the context. The context of Swadeshi is there. But how it appropriates the woman's domain and why she is painting. This why is not very important. I'm sorry. Okay, it's very biographical. Now, see, biographies are always very important. I also didn't mention this. Biographies are important. That is the place which leads you to certain questions. But how to contextualize the biographies? How to raise the questions? Why Swadeshi art was so important as a lens to look at those works? Why she is using her domestic space? Because those were her boundaries, and that politicization of that entire domestic space, ghar, becomes important. And that these discussions are not there in Parthomita's works. And I really have again a lot of problem when he discusses Amrita Sher-Gil also, because he brought this context and that idea of the libidinous and her body and biography when he was discussing, Amrita Sher-Gil, and entirely when you are reading Amina Kaur also in his work, he uses maybe carelessly, but you cannot be careless like this when Parthomita is writing on Amina Kaur, So this shows the disrespect. I'm sorry, I'm talking like this, but I think it's very important now to not only document this artist, but to intervene in the entire process of writing. So gynocritics, the female experiencing of the reality becomes very, very important. When you look at the paintings or prints or sculptures of these artists.
Just one more thing I want to mention before I open it to him. While you were presenting, it reminded me of what Abhinandan Tagore once wrote about women's art in passing. He said the difference between men's art and women's art is ephemeral. He was probably referring to Alcona and all that. And therefore, he was almost giving justification as to why that does not require canonization or preservation, because it does have that precious, because it's nothing unique. You can again see it again and again and again. Whereas, so it's quite interesting how time becomes one of the ways of justifying this kind of marginalization. Okay, so I'm sure a lot of you have some interesting questions to ask Aparna. So make the most of being here.
Can you pass the mic? Yes.
And this discussion had been also brought about by Griselda Pollock when she's discussing why class was not part of the main discourse of finance, the idea of ephemerality.
Patrick. Just introduce yourself.
Good to hear you. It feels like in your class. But thank you for this wonderful discussion. After a very long time, you're bringing back something which was important. But the last, just before you finished, you said something like some critique.
Gynocritics.
Right. So about the perceiving of the reality in a different manner. So I was also thinking because of the Amrita Sher-Gil movies, and then I was kind of comparing with, let's say, Sousa's movies, with the strength and the So I was also thinking about this thing. There's this French director who made this film, Portrait of a Lady on Fire. They show this love between two women. And then there was this discussion about talking about feminine gaze. Like if there is a male gaze, there should also be on the other side. We should also think about that. So that thing I was thinking, so I just want to know what you think about that in this context. So and I was also thinking about what you were saying about lines. And there's this thing about William Hogarth. They said the Hogarthian line of beauty, which is like curvature. And that is very dominantly Bengal school. But yeah.
Yeah.
Long one.
But interesting, actually. So when I was doing the walkthroughs, I mentioned that. And when I teach also, because this is very important, that if a woman is painting a female figure, and these are very, very academic studies, and see the Western genres of academic training or the Western academic training in all these art institutions, okay, included these three things: still life, nude study, and landscape. Okay, and when you look at these works, some of them, like when the woman sits backward and all, maybe she's avoiding the gaze and all. And there are very many interesting discussions on neoclassical woman artists by Rosika Parker and Griselda Pollock, where the women students used to have these new study classes, but only they could draw the woman from their back. Okay? But you don't exactly always see those kind of representations in Amrita's work, and definitely that tells about the academic the routine, okay, or that she was part of that academic training where she kind of we can say adopted that model, that male model, and sometimes that Tahitian gaze, of that overpowering gaze of Gaga looking at the Tahitian woman, sometimes in our some of our early works is present. We cannot really deny that. But why they are present, you have to think about that. And about the curvature and all, yeah, of course. I mean, they were looking at ancient Indian sculptures and, those sexuality. That sexuality comes from there. So, yeah. Give me that chance.
Yeah, just I was thinking as you were asking the question what the female gaze, I was reminded of that work that Pollock discusses, Susanna and the Elders, which is done by the woman artist, Gentileschi. And so what she does is, it was a very popular theme from, I think, one of the biblical stories about how there are three men, lecherous men who are kind of peeping into the place where Susanna is having a bath, peeping toms. And so the way it's shown by Caravaggio, it completely embodies the male gaze, about pleasure through looking and appropriation of woman's body and so on. And what the woman artist does is she shows the same narrative, but she makes the woman's discomfort at being looked at so evident and so poignant that female gaze cannot be just a reversal of male gaze. It has to be problematization of male gaze.
I have a quick question. There's a mic at the back. The mic is here. I don't think that mic is on.
No,
that's not working.
Well, I'm confidently speaking because I checked for mirror class. I'm used to it.
Even on. Okay.
Yeah.
So, whenever we talk about male gaze and female gaze, because I'm a woman artist, and when I first started out, I did work about self-portraiture and stuff like that. And as I've grown up, I just started observing that there's a lot of internalized male gaze in female works. And even now, and it's so funny, even when you say you're owning your sensuality or your sexuality, and you're looking straight ahead at your viewer, but there is still this problem of internalized male gaze and internalized, just like we have the internalized male chauvinism and all that stuff, that this thing. And I wonder in those times, like, how these women, like when I see Ambika sharing, I'm sorry, but I wonder about things like that, like, has there been, like, all these women artists, like, we do celebrate them for their boldness and their imagery of, like, nakedness in front of their own canvases, but I still wonder about this, and I wonder, did you see something like that, or did you feel like they owned it, or was there any memoirs that you read and haven't spoken about it? Yeah.
There's a very interesting book. The name of the book, but it's by Yashodhara Dalmia,
Okay.
which talks about her Amrita's personal, basically psychobiography. She brings in those writings, and actually, you see, one has to also think about the fact of her presence and the fact of the presence of these kind of images in exhibitionary space. But I think they were visible at that time, which is not also something which should be overlooked. You have it in Baroda, you have it, still it will have problems, I can tell you. These kind of representations. So imagine something like this happening at that time, and a woman talking, she has self-portraits and nudes also. So it's not only that one part is there, I'm not denying that. but also her representation, that as if he's reclaiming that idea of how a male artist is representing a female body by looking at her own self in nude. Just imagine the timeline, the context.
And also, just to add to that, no, I didn't, because all teachers, that, there is nothing called pure male or female gaze, because there's so much of intersectionality
Body is essentially sexual.
across gender and class. So within Sher-Gil's own work, remember Ill Women, where it may not be sexual, but the way she almost objectifies them, giving them that very melancholic look and all that. So I think when you bring in class, also caste inequality, then it complicates the idea. It's not as simple as just a female gaze.
And she talks about this gaze in two women, two girls.
Yeah.
That European girl who is standing like white girl, very confidently as a nude. And the darker one, probably the Indian one, who is just trying to, hide herself or hide her sexuality. That's a very interesting painting.
She got an award for that only.
That painting.
Yeah. I'd just like to add something. Let her ask and I will give
And
a little bit about the exhibition.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes, she should also. She was very, very much part of the entire conceptualization, collection of the works. And I think, I don't know, she should also speak about this. How as a woman, director of this gallery, she felt about this. I think there are some connections. She must have felt something.
Why did she?
Of this space. Please, let me finish.
Ma'am, I just had one question. You already gave one Kabadiwala example. I was just wondering how much most of the works that we see here, or most of the artists that you mentioned, how much agency did they have to sell their works? How much were they subject to the art market? And the works that we see here, how are they acquired? Where are they coming from? Are they coming from the families?
That's a good. Let her answer. Okay, this show took me 4 years to put together. Yes. So first I got the works of Kamala Gupta because I handled the estate of Prabha Gupta. So when those works came in, we were already handling Meera Mukherjee's works for the last 10 years. And so the one thing that I really appreciated about Archana's writing was Archana came in towards Aparna. I always call her by her mother's name. Archana was the mother whom I really love. I'm sorry. So what I really appreciated about Aparna was when she wrote about each of these artists, she did not contextualize them as the daughter of or the wife of, which a lot of these artists were. For example, Leela Chaudhuri was Shankar Chaudhuri's wife. Ambika Dhurandhar was M.V. Dhurandhar's daughter. Gouri Bhanja was Nandalal Bose's daughter. Okay? And Amrita, of course, didn't have that kind of a connection, though she came from Umrao Singh. She was Umrao Singh. So, what I mean is, she didn't use that connection and gave them an identity of their own, which is the part where I feel as a woman that was very, very important for me in this exhibition. Otherwise, the whole point really was that I have been looking at female artists and I feel that they have not got their due. And when I connected with her and I said, look, this show's coming up, but I need somebody who's done some work on this field. And she, of course, had done her dissertation and her PhD on that. And immediately we connected and she started naming off, isko bhi liao, wo bhi liao. Angela Trinidad ko liao. Acha, okay. She said, one wild goose chase across the country. I ran around looking for female artists. I went all the way back to the Travancore family to get Mangala Bai's works. Mangala Bai was our Raja Ravi Varma's sister. In 1870s, she painted. I actually almost bought 2 works, and it didn't go through. They didn't give it to me, and I couldn't bring it here. To tell you honestly, this story continued for several months, and we kept adding names and striking them off as in who will be in the show, even though I'd been working on it for 4 years. And finally, Debdutta, who's the co-curator, I must mention him. Unfortunately, he is sick and he couldn't be here. He was our kind of the first guy who said, Reena, the women artists have to be shown. Because with him, we had shown Nandalal Bose, we had shown Ram Kinkar Bej, Vinod Bihari Mukherjee, and then there was Leela Mukherjee, who never was talked about. We wouldn't get works of Leela Mukherjee because another gallery didn't at that time want to share it with us. So I couldn't get works of Chaudhuri from the family saying we don't have any work, sorry. How could I include an artist in an exhibition of women artists when the family doesn't want to give me a work? We couldn't get any Nasreen because nobody wanted to loan her work to us because they're so expensive today. So it was such a challenge to Amrita Sher-Gil, of course, was on top of the list, but they just came flying in. I can just tell you, my team will tell you, the day we decided the date of the show, the works just started coming in. I don't know how, I don't know from where. People called, Kiran at the museum said, oh, Nasreen, oh, she better be in the show, you get it. Ira Chaudhuri connected me to somebody and I got works on loan. Kiran, Barua, Sunayani, Devi, we have been connecting last 4 years, so those we have connected. Gouri Bhanja's family contacted us and said, oh, we've been thinking of something. Okay. So we got those. So this is how this show came together. It was a challenge, but what a lovely challenge. And we are so happy that this is our show that marks 20 years of our Prakar. This is a feather in our cap, and we are very happy about it. Thank you so much. My curator Siddhi is here, and I'd like her to say something, please.
Thank you for everyone for joining us. This project has been in works for quite a long time, but while we were working on the display of this exhibition, it just kind of happened on its own.
Yeah.
Honestly, like the day we had the display, we had a very rough idea of what how these artists needed their own space and needed to tell their own stories. And we had a rough idea and we were ready with the display as how we had imagined, because all the works hadn't arrived when we were planning the display. But eventually when we started the display, all the works just moved around the space 3 to 4 times. But finally, when they found their own space, it was such a harmonious collection that we thought that it wasn't something that we had planned. It was just something that happened on its own. It was the works that they were finding their own space.
I think this is the problem with us women. We always don't actually take credit for the interpretative energy which has gone into it.
That is so true. I was thinking of that. We will
Why
always
is
talk
not
like
taking it?
this.
Not the work has gone into it. Mental work has gone into it.
Yeah.
Definitely.
But still save intuitive work is what I do.
Definitely, and not just me. I wasn't alone doing the display. The whole team was there. Our manager, our gallery assistant Nancy, who's here today. So it was a collective effort of the women with Reena, and of course Aparna, who provided all the context that we needed to make this what it is right now. So I'm glad that we have so many people who are able to see the collective effort of the women and the women that we are trying to portray here. Thank you.
It's a nice show.
He's not here today, but other director, Abhijit Lal, he helped us, and this show was actually planned for Kolkata space first, but somehow with our planning for the 20th anniversary of Akar Prakar, it just happened to be the right time for this show to come here first, and then it will be moving to our Kolkata gallery. So thank you so much.
There's an activity we have downstairs.
Yes,
outreach team.
definitely. We have our outreach team, Devansha and Amrita, who have worked really hard on the project that we have downstairs as well. It's a fun puzzle for everyone to decipher and create the final image. So I hope you all can spare some time to put it together and we can unveil the final image. Thank you.
Yeah. You can say thank you. Thank you.
Nursing question.
Yes.
No, I won't be here. So,
Introduce yourself, please.
yeah, so I'm Aviru and I'm with both of them. I'm studying in JNU doing my PhD. So, my question is on similar lines as Gautami has already said, that the politics of collection, especially in the context of 20th century. So now we have seen a turn. I don't know how effective that would be. I mean, I'm not going into that discussion, but we have seen a turn where feminist art has been, got some sort of visibility in the 21st century, but which was not the case in the 20th century. So what was the politics of collecting? I mean, what is the, who as you have done your PhD as well, who were the collectors and what was the sort of politics behind collecting?
You're talking about my book, I mean, which was made into a book. That collection, that idea of collection?
No, not really, not like restricted to that. I'm talking in general, that how these women artists' works were collected. And adjoining to that, this question it's just an observation that I think I'll bring forth, that you were saying that the sculptures now. When we look at the ceramic pots, or especially the ceramic pots, it also sort of invokes a sense of touch that is left with these artworks. Now that becomes even more striking as we think of the absence of these, absence of the set of artworks of these women. Because, of them, as you were saying, also that there are very less artworks that survive or we are known of. So it's just an observation that through these works of, especially ceramics, it generates a sense of touch and materiality, which also sort of came in the hands of the women artists, let's say the textiles and so on. Yeah, that is.
So, what was your question actually?
Election.
No, when I documented, not even Sunayani Devi's work was being sold or bought like that. When I began, long back, my master's in literature, I collected it from her family, her grandson, Kishore Chatterjee. So I don't think that there existed a market. And that again is a very interesting question, actually. If your work is sold, then you are a professional practicing artist. And if it is not, then you are not acknowledged. So why they were not great women artists, that is another thing, and what was the other?
So next was just an observation about the activity that is brought forth.
I can tell you a little about the collection.
You can talk about it.
So we pulled out some Sunayani Devi, which we had collected in 2013-14 at the India Art Fair. We really pushed hard and said, please look at them. She's the sister of Aparna, sister of Gaganendranath. She painted with them. He taught her, Gaganendranath taught her. See, she's very childlike. We could not sell a single work. And nobody was interested. But today it's very different. There is a recognition. Also, I would say that, that Reba Hore also has just, in the last few years, there is a kind of re-emerging of these women artists. I think this whole market opened out after the market got drained of the Suzas and the Razas and the Muslims. No, it's a fact. Okay. Also, Nasreen came into the scene. Okay. Meera Mukherjee went to the Bukhara Museum in Germany. So there are many of these women artists are now being projected by the galleries, which is one of the activities that happen. And I think Parul and Aparna will do second that. What is shown in the galleries is eventually going to trickle into the market. And so the role of the gallery, I feel, is very important in how they are showing these artists.
And the discourses.
Yes, absolutely.
The 1980s is the time when the identity politics, especially in the Euro-American world, it really comes to the forefront. When not just question of gender, but also race and all really starts being discussed. And then I think to some extent, this course has got a lot of things to do with the way in which the art market also wakes up.
In fact, I remember meeting a curator of the Centre Pompidou, Sher-Gil, Sher-Gil, and Claudia Sher-Gil, and she told me that when they were doing the show of Indian art, I think it was 1983, if I'm not wrong, she came to India, picked 3 artists, of which one was Ati Vishwanathan and 3, 4. Then they told her, why don't you have a woman artist? Like, come on, no, you can't. This is France, you're showing it in Pompidou. Pick a woman artist. At that time, she picked up Ambika. Of that entire lot of women artists who were working, she found 83, I'm not wrong. So that actually turned many things. Arpita's profile changed because she became the first woman artist to be presented in an international exhibition. Having said that, Sunayani was shown in 1930s, I think, at the Women's Centre in London, which is what was a big thing of that time. So these things have happened, and these things do turn the ways the markets look at the women artists. So, and then the show that she talked about, looking through the
looking glass.
Yeah.
And it is also, this dowry movements, then the Sati movement, all these things also build up the feminist discourses and visuality.
Some idea of the collection is related to many things. Too many things are involved in that.
And also in literature, Suzy Tharu's, famous one, K. Lalita, Suzy Tharu's Women's Writing,
Those two
which became a landmark publication.
So women in literature, women are way ahead. Way ahead. Much earlier. Much earlier. Fine arts, now it's their time.
So while I was speaking about the gaze, the conversation brought to mind this John Berger's ways of seeing, and he talks about how men look at women, but women watch themselves being looked at. So I wanted to know what both of y'all have opinion about this, and whether you observed any this understanding of John Berger's in any of the artworks that you looked at, collected. Did you find any weight to that kind of statement that he's making? Do you think that these women artists portray themselves being looked at, other women being looked at, or is it more like, I don't know, if we're trying to express ourselves, where does that thing lie?
In fact, that's exactly what she was talking about, where can you really retrieve pure female agency? Because it's already, almost gets corrupted because of the patriarchal, context in which one is living. So it's very difficult to actually retrieve pure female desire. But I think John Berger's work was absolutely groundbreaking because it was early 70s, 1972. And in fact, at that time there was a very close confluence between Marxism and feminism. And later on, of course, there were differences. It was a very significant work at that time, of course.
I have a question. Okay. I'm done?
Yeah, it's fine.
You want to find us one?
Yeah.
I mean, definitely the way, I mean, it's not that, as I mentioned, that Amrita, and when she's presenting this poems in the public space, it's not because, when you look at a painting, when you look at a sculpture, when you look at a print, it's not only that work that you are looking at, but it should extend you to other questions, raise other questions, of what was the exhibition space, for these works, and that leads you to another question or another answer maybe. Just not literally where you see, where is, female, femininity in this works of Nasreen, why then she is part of this work. Feminism is very, very wide, Her presence itself is a feminist statement with all her colleagues in this exhibition space.
So my name is Nishtani and I don't know much about art, but because this is a show about women and their art, however much I know about feminism and the gender question, I have only learned through literature. So, and because we see largely that the lived experiences of women is governed by anger and frustration at not being seen the way they want to be seen. So, I think some of it is answered, but maybe if you could take us through how, if you see that in these kind of arts as well.
Would you see that?
I mean, I don't know how to look at art, honestly.
No, there is no one way of looking at art. See, anger can be channelized. Like, I was very angry in Chandni Theatre as a student, as a female student. Because I used to work with female youths and some of my self-portraits even. And I was being smirked at by my male classmates. And this is not his fault. It's the fault of the entire academic discourse which is there. And I generalized, that inspired me, motivated me to write my book, Transcending the Glassness. So anger, sometimes it can be very evident through the materiality, and image making, materiality, everything. So, maybe this entire exhibition is came out of an anger, to be very specific. For my case, my position is that, why? When you write about Meera Chaudhuri, or you put her, he said, his next special issue was being published by Mar, and there you see Chaudhuri. Why not, why don't you see her in any, anthology, modern Indian art?
Well, my anger at the day of the opening, when I bumped into one of the artists, I don't know whether I should mention the name, and who says, I was saying that, oh my God, why we had to wait for so long for such a show to happen and all that. So he had the cheek to say, Mal nahi tha. I said, Mal tha, soch nahi thi.
We could move to
Yes.
and we can continue the conversation.
Thank you all. Thank you, Team Prabha. Bhanja, Baliga, Amrita also, and Gupta. It's not here. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And thanks to the audience.